Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Lyons, we've touched several times on the transition of the KC-46, but I want to put a finer point on it. In your testimony, you say this is your number one shortfall, and you go on to say it will create a critical and deepening gap in taskable aerial refueling aircraft and aircrews for the next 5 to 7 years. You do a very good job of outlining the problem, but then at the end of your prepared remarks, you say, we recommend reevaluating aerial refueling force structure plans annually. Frankly, that doesn't reassure me. I want to know what's the plan. You've identified a serious problem here. We can't project force if we can't refuel those airplanes. And you've identified a 5 to 7 year, you characterize it as a deepening gap. What do we do? And perhaps you don't need to give me a full answer here, but for the record, I'd like to see an action plan, not just reevaluation.
Senator, we'll be happy to work with the Air Force and come back to you on that with a joint plan. In the near term, what we had agreed with the Air Force is to retain 28 legacy aircraft to mitigate the conversion for the KC-46. The KC-46, as we receive that aircraft, as the Air Force receives that aircraft, will take some time to work through the Cat 1 deficiencies, as well as convert crews. And so you can appreciate there's going to be tension between crews. And so in some scenarios, we're tail limited, in some scenarios, we're crew limited. So it's a bit of a combination. It's a very complex program for the Air Force to work. They're pushing as hard as they can with Boeing.
If you could give to the committee a detailed analysis of what you identify as the gap, how many tails, how many crews, and what the solution is. Because if we have a crisis and need that capacity, saying, well, we were, it was a complicated problem, isn't going to cut it.
Oh, Senator, I agree. And the issue isn't when there's conflict. Actually, it's in day-to-day competition. So just to be clear, in today's day-to-day competition is where we're taking the reduction.
We're stressed right now.
We're stressed today, and that's where the 10 and the 13 that are in the current FY21 reduction that we're working with the Air Force and the Department to bring those back.
Look forward to working with you on that.
Yes, sir.
General Walters, quick question. Do we have sufficient visibility of Russian submarines in the Atlantic? Do we know where they are?
We do, but not for 100% of the time.
I don't want that, whatever the missing percent is, to be off the coast of Maine.
I agree, Senator.
Or New York. Or
absolutely.
Not to be too parochial about it. What's the risk of I think it's unlikely, I hope I'm right, that Russian tanks are going to roll across the border into the Baltics. But what is our thinking and strategic thinking about a hybrid kind of activity involving Russian language, a kind of Crimea model? Is that a concern, and do we have a strategic response?
It is very much a concern, Senator, and it has to do with the posture of our forces as we sit today in competition and attempt to effectively deter. And we are improving in our ability to do so, and we have to do so to a point to where we compel any potential enemy of us to not take those first steps against us. And NATO agreed in the NATO military strategy to also recognize a whole-of-government, whole-of-nation approach, and that will allow us to dramatically improve our posture so that we can better see the battle space from an indications and warning standpoint and better be able to more proactively deploy to defend.
And be prepared for a different kind, for not a traditional tanks rolling over the border invasion.
Absolutely, Senator.
It's a whole, I think we should, and I'm sure you are, a lot of study on Crimea and how that played out and what the response could have been or might have been.
Yes, Senator.
Final question. The attacks on the Saudi tanker field, and also the Iranian missile in Iraq after Soleimani's death, to me raised concerns about our ability to defend against, I don't know what you want to call them, cruise missiles, low-level missiles, intermediate range, and I believe the missile, the Iranian missile, was an ICBM. What is our capability to defend against those kinds of attacks? Because it didn't work in Iraq and it didn't work in Saudi Arabia.
Senator, it's improving, but it has to get better. And we have a plan that refers to integrated air and missile defense that comprehensively takes into account what happens at long ranges and long altitudes and short ranges and lower altitudes. And it all has to be nested together from a indications and warning standpoint and command and control standpoint.
So you would agree that this is a significant gap in our defense that we really need to get to work on in a hurry?
It's a shortfall, Senator, and we need to continue to work on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.